You.
I'm well.
Good evening, everybody. If you're joining us or you're listening via the podcast, we are here tonight, and tonight's topic is one that we wish we weren't discussing. I was going to say one we wish we didn't need to discuss, but I think it needs to be discussed. So, last time we were talking about a school shooting that took place. What was it, Florida?
Hmm.
And it had come out that that was kind of apparently was motivated by bullying, and we kind of forgot about it, right? Like society kind of just was like, okay, it was bullying. The shooter came back. It was over with. This one feels a lot like Parkland, a lot like Columbine. The shoot we're talking about the shooting that took place at Oxford High School in Michigan, and I have a few questions for my mom. But mom, first, you have the floor. Your thoughts on where we're at, anything you've learned in the last 24 hours. I know there's updates coming in left and right. Where you at?
I just feel very sad. When you treat kids, you go back and you think about all the kids that you work with, and it could be any one of them. I think about your kids, my grandkids. And where I'm at is that not much changes. And it's just as you said, there's a lot of talk and conversation right after the tragedies, but I'm not sure that there's that consistent, cohesive effort that we need. We have to learn what needs to change. And we'll talk about what I think needs to change later on. But tonight, I need to raise everybody's awareness that we have to stay on this and not just think about it for the first few days after the tragedy. It always goes through my minds, especially since I've treated so many teenagers. How do you get up in the morning, do your thing, eat breakfast, and it's the last day of your life when you're 14 years old, younger than your oldest granddaughter? It's just unthinkable, isn't it? To the place where when I grew up was the safest place you could be. School is should be the safest place that you can be. How can that be your last day of life that
I
you
got to
went to
stop you real
school?
quick because I always tell Monica this story from the sixth grade, when I was in sixth grade, and two of these kids got into a fight, and one of the assistant principals, who I think he was the assistant principal, but he was a teacher that we all respected. He was kind when he needed to be kind. He was tough when he needed to be tough. And he was just very disappointed that these two young men were still going back and forth, even after he had broken up the fight. And he stopped both of them, told them to be quiet, looked and addressed the entire class. And he said, when we come to school, we're supposed to feel safe. We're supposed to feel like we're a family. We're supposed to be engaged. We're supposed to learn. But what always sticks out to me is that when he said, when we come to school, we're supposed to be safe. Like, if things are going wrong at home, maybe with the family or whatever the case may be, you come to school and it's kind of a break from everything. But yes, and I mean, per my wife who's a teacher, active shooter drills are now a thing. I got a call 2 weeks ago from Alexis's school, the automated machine. It said that we have an active shooter drill tomorrow, and it's reality now. Unfortunately, over the last 10, 15 years, it's as common as a fire drill.
I went back to look in preparation for talking about it tonight. There's been shootings for hundreds of years,
Yeah.
but it really started to escalate in the late 80s and early 1990s. That's when it really started to increase by
So let me
quite a
pause you real
volume.
quick. So you were wrapping up your PhD, the late 80s, early 90s, or you were
Yes,
already practicing.
I was already
So what
practicing.
changes did you see from school to being an intern to actually practicing? And the reason I ask that is because what changed in society with families and home life that has started to transition and become more common, unfortunately?
A disconnect. So clearly, a disconnect between kids and their parents. It's the first time with the advent of all the technology things that kids are better at than their parents. So it's the first time that parents really can't monitor and the kids have a whole world. So I always say, now, although tonight's not a funny topic, I'm old enough that kids waited in the waiting room with books to read. And what do they wait with now? All their electronics. So
Mm-hmm.
so when I say disconnect, so I started to practice when there was family dinners. parents knew what was going on in their kids' lives. If you look at most of the shooters, it start with Klebold and with Eric and Dylan in
Mhm.
Columbine. And
Mhm.
so they had a whole arsenal, a whole uh, basement full of things that gave signs. So
Yeah.
how in 1999, what was going on, and I'll keep using that word, a disconnect between the parents and their kids and really not knowing what's going on in the kids' lives. None of the shooters got up that morning and decided to shoot on that morning. None of the shooters were okay and fine. It's not that. And I think there's so many things that bother me about this, mostly that we don't stay on a consistent effort. As you said, it's part of our culture now. We need to wake up. It's not a random once in a while event anymore. It is part of the culture and climate of school. I treat kids with anxiety. They're afraid to go to school. Could you imagine going to school at that school now at Oxford? I
Hold
can't
on,
even
I want
imagine.
to
But
go ahead while I'm looking for
well, I
this.
was saying there's so many signs along the way, but where are the signs, Ryan, on things that the parents don't always have access to, right? So
Yeah.
it's in their, what do you call it, social media. And so I think parents have lost control of some of that. And then the advent of everybody working too many hours, poor work-life balance in the family dynamic, not strong ties anymore for kids and religion, not as strong a ties as I'm not preaching one way or the other. I'm just saying the changes that I've seen and kids being raised by kids.
Yes.
By
So
right, the second family is peers, kids, the internet. So many changes in the
so I'm
family
gonna back
structure.
up. I'm gonna back up real quick. So the first thing I want to say is that I read yesterday that the district attorney who is bringing forth the charges to Ethan Crumbley is adding a terrorism charge, which people are saying that it is new, right? It's not
Right.
common. And the district attorney has explained her reasoning, and I agree with it. She said these students and this faculty, these families have been terrorized, even though these kids are alive and safe. They went home. They probably slept with the lights on. You know, they're 16, 17, and now they're reverting back to being, I'm sure you could speak to this, 4 years old, 3 years old. Just they can't. If the mom and dad close the refrigerator the wrong way, they're going to be startled, right? And they're thinking about it, and they're thinking about how they ran out, and seeing law enforcement show up in large numbers with rifles, and just the entire thing itself. So the terrorism charge, I think that's new, but probably definitely needed. Is it going to bring an end to all of this? Unfortunately, probably not likely. But the one question I had for you, or one of the few questions that I've been thinking about all day, if the family, not just the shooter. Okay, I'm just gonna say if the family, or let's say that the individual, the child who's having trouble, if the family gets to you, gets to the guidance counselor, there is still a chance, right? There's still a chance to get through the teenager, to get through the family. But you have said that you said on a few of your podcasts that's the wall right there, the parents that they don't want to hear what you have to say, what the guidance counselor has to say, and it's been reported that the school met with Crumbley's parents on Monday and on Tuesday morning in regards to his behavior. So, where's the point where it's just like this? And I know that there's rights and legal things of that nature, but where is it just like this kid cannot come to school? This kid cannot to school. So I did what I always do, and you always say I ask two questions. First, is there a chance if they're at you, if they're seeing the therapist, the family counselor, are the parents the wall? And then at what point should, I know there's laws, but should schools just be like, this kid cannot come to school? That we're saying it right now. Do not let your child come. He's not welcome tomorrow.
So you're talking about cracks in the system. Where does it fall apart? That this was my whole dissertation on the prevention of violence. And there's so many cracks in the system. It was really eye-opening to me that they met with him and his parents on Tuesday morning. Now, here, would a reasonable person say that if they had to bring the parents in Monday and then Tuesday, was it reasonable to let him stay in the school?
That Yeah, I don't understand that
That's
part, and that's what I'm
that,
saying.
and we're not blaming. The point of this podcast is not to blame. It's to raise awareness and to say it's never going to be one thing. You're going to hear all kinds of arguments about Second Amendment rights, about guns, gun violence. We need to wake up. This is a very deep problem, and it will not have a fix by one thing. Will not. So you're talking about acceptance of parents as to kids having mental health problems. And what do I always say? We have such a stigma about mental health problems. We make it harder as a society for everybody, kids, parents, everyone, to accept that they might have a mental health problem. If you go back, I really don't like saying the perpetrators' names because these crimes are so heinous. I don't want to memorialize their names. So I'll say AL was the shooter at one of the worst at Newtown, Connecticut, at Sandy Hook, and one of the worst because the children were so young. His mother refused, if you go back and read the history, to accept his mental illness. Now, there are some mixed reports that say she tried to get him some help, but whether he had ASD, he was on the spectrum, whatever it was, there was a lot of data that I read that said she refused to accept his illness. Did you find something on the?
Well, I'm just sharing. Oh,
Okay,
wait, hold
good.
on. We have well, first of all, I was sharing what you said about signs. Crumbley made threats on social media and in a journal indicating he planned the shooting, right? So there's signs right there.
Right.
And then we have a somebody's writing in, there's an option where schools can send a student out for a psych evaluation and the student cannot return until cleared by a doctor. But here's another point. Student misbehavior is at an all-time high. Period. So the fact that he was in the principal's office Monday, Tuesday isn't actually that severe or a marker because it's so common for kids to be misbehaving. I think I would agree with that, but and here's where I don't agree, and I think that this is like why did he make it in the school? I believe it was communicated from the school that they had knowledge of him talking about being violent towards student and faculty, and that's why they were there.
Right.
And then we're just like, well, kids are kids, boys will be boys, girls will be girls, nothing's gonna happen, right? But me, as somebody who's married to a teacher and has plenty of friends who are in the education system, or and my daughters, my children are in school, I get agitated when I hear that somebody makes a threat or a joke, and then suddenly it's like nothing, no action is taken after Combine, after Parkland, after Oxford now. Just people still just don't take it as seriously as I believe they should.
They do the same thing. So it's a parallel process, and then we'll get back to Monica's point. So it's a parallel process about we don't want to accept that this is woven into our culture now, into the culture of school. There's going to be more. In the tragedy at Parkland, one of the parents who was really, really vocal, said he predicted in Parkland was what, 2018, that there will be another shooting like this. Imagine how
Hmm.
they feel. Imagine how the parents feel. I think his name was Fred Guttenberg. His daughter was beautiful,
Imagine
bright,
how the parents from
gifted.
Combine feel.
Exactly.
Some of
So
them are
many years.
grandparents now.
Right. But back to Monica's point and your point, and I don't know what it takes. Maybe Monica can address it because I haven't worked in a school in years, but what it takes to evoke that psychological evaluation. But listen, isn't it better to undergo an unnecessary psych evaluation and find out the kid's fine than to take a risk on the kids' lives? It's not an invasive process. So wouldn't it be better to err on the side of caution and see what Monica's saying, that we need to take it more seriously? Now, if you look, the perpetrator from Tuesday's shooting had left a lot of journaling, so much anger building up. It's really hard to believe. Back to my point about the disconnect with parents and children, isn't it hard to believe that you're living with your son, anger to the point that they're journaling, plotting, planning mass murder, and you missed all of it? And I'm not blaming, I'm just saying we need to do something different. We really need to educate parents about taking these things seriously. And something was really off because how did he kill the students? With what? With his parents. with his father's weapon. So
I
even if he's a
yeah.
little bit off, right? Even if the kid's a little bit off, you got to take really better care of where you put your weapons, don't you? So they're not,
That's
right? They're not
100%.
taking it seriously. And that's something I want to get to about the law when I say it can't be one thing. It's not ever going to get fixed with one thing.
So
We're
so
going
let
to
me,
have, Mhm.
because I just want to ask, because I know that you're giving a very well, a very good explanation, and you're speaking to all of these great points and everything like that. But I want to hear. Look at me, focus. I see you looking at the comments. I'll bring one
I
up when
am.
they're when they're important. Okay, not that you're. Excuse me, if you're listening, not that
They're
your
all
comments aren't
important.
important. Not that they're not important. That's not what I meant. I'm sorry, but that's not what I meant at all. I'm sorry, but I want to hear from you, from Dr. Joan, who operated in Newtown and New Jersey and Richboro, Council Rock, Pennsbury. You're back on the couch. Parents come in. They're talking about disturbing behavior, or they're talking about disturbing behavior that has been relayed to them through the school system, a coach, another parent, somebody. These parents are still in denial. Is there still a chance for the family and the teenager will say, when they get to you, and is it too late if it gets to a guidance counselor or a principal and there's like proof of threats, like screenshots, like videos, like because that's what I've been wondering all day. Is it too late if it gets to the principal? Is there still a chance? Like, where is it like we need to do something right now? There's still a chance. Where's the gap? Like, where's the gap? I know we just mentioned the gaps, but
There are cracks in the system. So I can't be a good psychologist and think it's ever too late when somebody's this young, right? I have to
are you
always
part of the
have
problem?
some, I have to always have some
That's
hope.
kind of a serious question because we want to
No,
be
no,
positive.
we
We want to
always,
believe that people, that children, that everybody's capable of change,
right.
but
But
sometimes there's just straight evil in people.
but hope, Brian, doesn't mean that we can't practice reality. So one of the things I think that I'm always aghast that's not in place are better evaluations. Listen, hope doesn't mean that we wouldn't hospitalize or put a kid away for a while. Hope doesn't mean that we wouldn't protect society and get them treatment. But parents' denial is not all of the problem, but it's some of the problem. The lack of funding for good mental health is a problem. Mental health falling apart during COVID has been a problem
I was
because
thinking about that
parents,
today.
oh yeah, parents are
We're all
reluctant to,
suffering, all of us, parents,
everybody's
grandparents,
suffering,
everybody's suffering from some sort of mental health issue the last 2 years. And even if you got it under control and you're feeling better and positive, we all have been affected in the mental health area, 110%.
which is why I say you want to focus on, can we change the mental health system? Is there something we could do more? So here's the parts. Let's lay out the parts. I know that there'll be some people who will argue the constitutional right to bear arms, but let me tell you something. The male brain, particularly the male brain, is not fully formulated till age 24. In this country, you can get, what is it called? An AR-15, a rifle at
You can get a
18.
hunting rifle pretty young. Yeah.
So how are we giving rifles at 18 knowing about the impulsivity of young people? And go back and look at the weapons used since Columbine. And a lot of those weapons were, now those kids were really young, but some of the weapons were legally purchased. I think the one in Newtown, Connecticut, in Sandy Hook, was legally purchased by an 18-year-old. So what, we're going to have to change some of the legislation. We're going to have more scrutiny. I have had patients, nobody's going to like this. I've had patients who've been in and out of psychiatric hospitals and legally purchased a weapon.
I'm going to
Legally
flip the coin on
purchased a
you.
weapon. Go ahead.
I'm going to flip the coin on you. And I know that some of our listeners, one in particular, is going to agree with me or at least nod her head when she hears this. I'm going to flip that narrative and say that I put it all on the parents. Okay. I follow a number of Second Amendment enthusiasts, former military, retired military, and they have shown their children how to responsibly handle firearms, how to move with firearms, how to take a straight, steady shot, things of that nature. But as far as I know, they're very well balanced individuals, the parents, if that makes sense, right? They're
Right.
showing their child how to use it and how to use it properly and effectively. But again, the parent is the example in this case. So that's where I flip the narrative about I'm not saying that people who failed mental health evaluations shouldn't be able to purchase firearms, but going back to the parents who leave the weapons out, parents who show the kids where they are and they're just not responsible with the firearm. That's where I flip the narrative and put the entire thing on the parents.
All right, so let me ask you something. Well, I was reading about what has gone wrong and what are the things we haven't passed that should have been passed. So there's a movement out there to have storage rules and storage laws that you have to safely store a weapon. And if you don't
100%.
store it safely, you're
Parents should
going to
be
be,
charged.
there you go.
A hundred
But why
percent. A
haven't we
hundred
passed
percent.
them? So how can we? So it's not about the right to bear arms or carry a weapon, but
Mm-hmm.
particularly if you're a parent, and we haven't even talked about the 3-year-old who gets their hands on a gun, right,
Mm-hmm.
and kills themselves or their sibling. How could there not be storage rules and laws by now? How could there not be? Now they're talking about charging this perpetrator's parents, and I think they should be charged
We're
because
gonna
they
get to
didn't
the parents
store
in a
the weapon.
second.
Right. They didn't
We're gonna
store the weapon properly. But back to the mental health evaluation, so much has to change. That's why nothing changes. Because we're going to talk about the people against young people having guns will make it too broad an argument and say they just shouldn't have weapons. There's too many guns in the country. Not the answer. We have to look at the ages. There's a proposal to have to flag people as high risk, to team up with the mental health clinics and hospitals, make sure that they let people know, people who've been in and out of the hospitals, not deny those people a gun or weapon, but what is wrong with, back to Monica's point, let's say somebody was in and out of a hospital, and let's say they're better and they can have that weapon and they can be responsible. What's wrong with delaying it and just flagging them as high risk and getting a mental health clearance and making sure they're okay? Why would anybody urgently need a weapon? What would be the urgency? Right? So
I agree.
I like that proposal about making a designation of high risk, using more scrutiny, reviewing the ages that young people can get weapons, the storage safety rules, make sure we store these things safely. And what about, back to Monica's point, a better system of evaluating kids that seem to be at risk?
So
And I'd
pause.
rather, right.
So Monica says, and this is where I bring it back to the parents, and perhaps you will agree. Monica wrote, insurance issues aside, I do think a benefit to the mental health system came out of COVID is the access to telehealth. Who has to take the kid to their therapy appointment? The parent who refuses to believe that there's a problem, the parent who is part of the problem, the availability to mental health through telehealth gives access to more. Now let's draw the picture for everybody who's listening, because it's really easy to say when everything's well and good and your kids are doing well and your family's well, it's real good to say, yeah, it's I don't understand why they didn't take this kid to therapy. We don't know the parents. I'm not defending the parents. I'm just saying in general, all parents, right? We have a kid who's misbehaving. We have a kid who needs some mental health. I'm playing this game right now. I'm being honest with everybody. I'm playing this game right now myself, of trying to connect the dots on my availability, my daughter's mother availability, and my daughter, so that we all can make it to a therapy appointment, which we haven't made it to in 3 weeks. Right? I'm playing the game. So I'm talking about parents come home from work, or they have work, or the other sibling has swimming or something else, right? And we'll get to the therapy appointment next week, next month, and it just keeps getting pushed off when it should be happening every week or bi-weekly for this particular individual who is showing signs of depression, anxiety, is building journals, whatever the case may be. but the parent keeps putting the appointments on the back burner, if that makes sense.
But you have to understand, it's not like I've seen 1,000 kids with plans to hurt someone, but I have seen some kids, it's a small number. Of those kids, an hour a week or 2 hours a week with me was not the answer. Of the more serious kids that had plans to really do something, we had to put them away for a long time. And that's another issue. And I think, don't you think the parents know that? So back to your question about, is there hope? There's hope, but it's intensive treatment. At the time that a child's psyche, he's a child, he's 15. I want to see him as an attorney. I want to see him tried as an adult, but I know that he's a child. And what did I just say? What a dilemma, these hideous crimes, and yet his brain is not even fully developed. It's not going to be any short term care. Do we have adequate long term care facilities? No, we really don't. That's why I said it's not a simple answer. It's not one thing. Of a kid who, one of the kids where it's a success in that we intercepted, my staff and myself intercepted his plan to kill his family. He did show up in my office. I think I told this story before, and said he was going to kill. He and his father showed up a few years ago when we had an office, not a virtual office, and said he was going to kill his father in my office. He picked me as the doctor because I had so many degrees hanging up, and he had for months while I'm doing therapy, he's imagining how he's going to smash my degrees and stab his father with the glass. So, see, it's not guns because he's going to kill the dad with the glass. I, whatever, something was with me
Yep.
that day, and I was able to break away to get to the police. And I did tell the story. It changed my whole view of police. I am pro police, but it really changed my view when the police walks in. Now, a psychologist is calling 911, 911. Kid wants to murder his father in my office, he's starting to smash my degrees and wants to use the glass. I don't know who he's going to cut up. And when you see the police walk in with no thought to their own safety, it really changes everything. Do you know what I'm saying? They just want to
100%.
keep the father, the kid, myself. There was another patient. There's always a dog. I always have a therapy dog. And they just want to make sure that nobody gets hurt. No clue to what they're walking into. That kid went away for 3 years. 3 years. So it's not, the parents know it's not a short term process. Now, that was a kid where I told the parents week after week, this is not a normal amount of hostility. We got to do something. But the parents didn't want to believe it. But eventually, we were lucky that the kid came to my office, weren't we? And
I got to
not
ask you
not
something.
somewhere else. Sure.
So, what has changed over the years? Because you're guilty of this too, and I was thinking about it while I was getting ready today. Back during Columbine, or when
Mhm.
Columbine happened,
Mhm.
uh, it was Marilyn Manson. We blamed The Matrix. We blamed
Mhm.
Keanu Reeves. We blamed Eminem. We blamed the music, the movies, the TV, the video games, Grand Theft Auto. I don't hear that narrative anymore. All right. So from where you're sitting, where you did say it, I remember you had your concerns as well that perhaps the Matrix and a few other things, pop culture wise, influenced the actions of others. What's changed? Why is that narrative not really the case anymore?
No, I think people are still concerned. I mean, it's not my narrative, Doctor Mom. It's that I read all the psychological research when I was in school, and if you take a group of kids, boys and girls, and you expose them to video games with violence, they'll have more aggressive play afterwards. That's just a fact. That's what the research will bear out. But I think it's become, like I said, so much part of society that we have to go beyond that. And now we're looking at everything, the access to the weapon. The overwhelming majority access of the weapons was what? They got access through the parents. The parents are the biggest distributors of the weapons. I think our eyes have been opened to other things. I still don't think it's good what we um, what young kids respect in the aggressive videos, but I think we opened our eyes to see it's much more than that. And one of the biggest things is something that I'm proud that we do the podcast on is the lack of access to mental health, the stigma, the not having the resources. That kid that I just talked about, it took so long from the time of the incident in my office to get him into long-term care. We had him in an interim facility in between, but it took months to find that long-term care facility. So we definitely have to augment the resources. So I don't, back to your original question, I think we're still aware of it and concerned, but there's many other factors that are operating now as the gun violence has been so rampant. And I know you were posting, not to get off topic, about the shooting at Temple. And I don't know if everybody knows. Here's a gap. The justice system. Are we ever going to hold the judges accountable? Did you know that they had that perpetrator in custody, Ryan, in August? The one who killed Sam Cullington? Was that his last name? The
Mm-hmm.
boy at Temple?
Mm-hmm.
The perpetrator was in August for a carjacking, and the victim, he had the gun on the victim's head.
So I'm gonna flip the narrative real quick because that's a completely
And I
different
just want to say
podcast.
the judge let him out and reduced the bill.
Right. So completely different topic. But I do understand what you're saying. So we're talking about, you keep mentioning access to firearms and things of that nature, and I'm sure the Second Amendment activists are going to love us after this episode. But let me bring this up. I'm not sure you knew this fact. So what about this? And then we'll get to Shauna and Marla's comments because I think it's going to
Okay.
tie in a little bit. So off of Fast Facts, apparently from Heavy.com, Crumbley was featured in the local newspaper as a fifth grader for a project on poverty and hunger. I'm sorry. So it goes on to say that when Crumbley was a fifth grade student at Lakeville Elementary School in 2017, his name was in the local newspaper for positive reasons. Reporters covering an exhibit where students presented solutions to real life problems featured Crumbley for his group project focused on poverty and hunger. I see people that are on the street sometimes that are homeless and hungry, and so I feel like I should take action and help them, he said. So it looks like something drove him to where he is. And I mean, that's always the case, right?
Right,
It's
right,
not
right,
just a
right.
random case, but, people, he's going to be forever. This is what he did. This is what he did. He took four people away from their families, and their lives could have gone on and they could have done great things. He could have gone on with his life, turned around and done great things as well. And now five people's lives are over. But it appears that
And
it wasn't always that way.
one's still in critical condition, and then the fallout, as I've said before, if you look at the victims of 911, the psychological trauma and fallout, none of these kids will ever be the same. Their lives psychologically will never be the same.
I heard that there was a young lady from, she survived Columbine, and she was praising her husband for being as patient as he was, because even after they conceived and brought a beautiful baby into the world, she still just had a ton of issues, mental health
Yeah,
issues. And she said, and if I get upset, it's because if you know me, I'm very emotional. She said that the hardest day of her life was when she dropped her daughter off to her first
of
day of
course.
school,
Of course.
which is awful. That should be a life moment that you're celebrating, that you're happy, that you're taking pictures, whatever. Grandparents are there. She said that was one of the hardest, worst days of her life.
And I want to say two things before you go to the comments. And one is that, and they all get to me, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to any of the victims, but the Sandy Hook one, just to think of little kindergartners being shot, it's just so unthinkable. But that perpetrator gave away his Christmas toys to poor kids.
Oh,
So
you're
you're
saying is a
asking
good,
what goes.
yeah.
So back to your question about why we always have hope, and are people just born evil? Obviously not. Obviously not, because adolescence is that turbulent time when the brain changes. And back to your point about Columbine, I don't know if Shauna remembers, your sister, my daughter, is writing a comment, and right after 911, I dropped, because I'm neurotic and took you kids to school. I didn't like the school buses. I dropped Shauna off and I said, I'll see you later. And she said, how do you know you'll see me? She was sixth grade. And she said, at Rolling Hills, and she said, how do you know you'll see me later? I said, what are you talking about? And she said, I live in a world of, and all the things, I live in a world of, whatever it was, Columbine, 911. How do you know you'll see me later? That was quite a moment when she said that. The reality of my daughter going to school. How do you know you'll see me later? that's the world that the kids grow up in today. So, all right, you want to go to the comments?
We go into the comments. So Marla says at my son's school they are having problems and the school has to have a police presence. The children are expressing dissatisfaction with the administration and not being heard or respected. What role does the administration in the school play? I'm gonna wait for if any of my friends or wife are listening, chime in about administration and the challenges they're facing. But I don't know if you have any insight on that, Mom. I just heard you say that you haven't been in the school system for quite a while.
Here's my insight. You wonder by now why there isn't somebody with a weapon. I mean, I read a lot about the drills in the last 48 hours. The drills really don't do much good. I would encourage everybody to read the
I agree with
research,
that.
and they cause
Hmm.
undue anxiety in the kids. And I can tell you
Hmm.
in treating the kids that they cause undue anxiety. And God bless the teachers, they're as brave as can be, but really barricading the door, they're just defenseless. When somebody's got a weapon, right? They're no matter what they do, they're defenseless. That young brave boy, Tate, he tried on Tuesday to protect the kids and he's dead. So they're just so defenseless. So here's some of the arguments back to Marla's point why the administration doesn't have somebody armed there, a guard. They're afraid that the parents won't like that and that if somebody had a weapon around kids, they might be overzealous
I got
and
to show
use
you
it on
something
the
real
kids.
quick
Sure.
in regards to what we're saying about drills and anxiety and things of that nature. Hold on one second. Just because I want to make sure the volume's on for this or it won't work. Here we go. This was yesterday. I can't hear it. Why can't I hear it? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, he said it's safe to come out.
Now, we're not willing to take that risk right now. I can't hear you. We're not taking that risk right now. Okay, well, come to the door and look at my bag, bro.
Yeah, bro.
No, he said bro.
He said bro. Red flags. Oh.
Slow down, you're fine.
I want you to drop backpacks. You're okay. We're okay. Drop your backpacks. Still. Christy? Yes. Drop your backpacks.
Wow.
So that scene, from what I've read and heard, it was Crumbley knocking at the door, posing as the sheriff, and the teacher and the students were alert enough and aware enough to know that we probably shouldn't answer the door right now. And I told this to Monica last night. The students, and I always say we don't give our children enough credit. When you saw them all turn around and look at one another and say, "He said, bro," they knew something was wrong instantly.
Sure.
They said a police and a lot of police officers commented saying that they try to keep the situation even keeled when they're making an arrest, like, bro, man, keep everybody calm. Um, but something didn't seem right, and good on the teacher and the students for not opening the door and making that decision.
Oh,
But
yeah, that would have been
um,
many more victims. I'd like to
yeah,
ask Monica and any other teacher. I was thinking about this. Why aren't there interior locks? Why isn't there some system that you can lock from the inside and nobody could get in the classroom? Or do they have that?
I haven't been in this class. I
Why are
didn't
they
really go to class when I
barricading?
was in
Does
class.
does Monica know or is there a teacher out there who knows? At this point, there should be top security, shouldn't there?
I think it's. Oh, Monica says her door has one.
How
So
does
it's
that
a new.
work? So That's great. So they
Yeah.
can't, you can lock yourself in. That's great.
If she says
It's
it's new.
new. Yeah.
It's new.
Why is it new? We just said
Mm,
Columbine happened
It's
how many years ago?
oh my
21
god,
years ago,
21
22?
years ago. Um, so real quick, I just want to say something as we're talking about Columbine and locks, and we saw law enforcement officers in that video, and then I'm going to jump to Shauna's comment and Monica's as well. I, so the I believe his name was Israel, the sheriff who was on the scene at Parkland that told all the officers to stand by. He lost his position as the sheriff. He has been criticized by multiple law enforcement agencies that he could have saved more lives if he had told his deputies or and all the officers to go in right away. Right. So I think that if people don't know, and if any of my law enforcement friends are listening, nowadays you're on the scene, you're alone, you go in by yourself, you took an oath to protect and to serve, there's children and anybody's lives at stake, you go in. But to paint the picture for people, until the scene is clear and all clear, you see a student dead and you're on your own, you hear gunshots, you got to move on, you got to keep going through the hallways, you see another student dead, you got to move on until you hear the all clear. EMS fire is not coming in until that situation is deemed safe. And that's why the two deputies carried Tate out, because the situation was not deemed safe. Unfortunately, he died in the back of a squad car. Um,
But they
but
were wonderful and tried everything that
but real quick,
they
from a
could.
psychological standpoint, Mom, let's
Mhm.
say that you're on the scene and the adrenaline's pumping and you're managed to make it through. When the adrenaline calms down, just what exactly does that law enforcement officer, what might they go through post having to have lived through that day as well?
That's all the things that you were mentioning before, that what we call now commonly PTSD, the hypervigilance. So first, what they go through is a lot of second guessing themselves. Could they have done more? The hypervigilance, the fact that it's young people is so hard on the police officers and security. And I think that you see them. You see these guys on the air choking up, right? Like nothing you've ever seen when it's kids involved. So it's definitely a period of mourning, loss. What do you think those guys are going through that carried Tate out and yet he still died? You
100%.
know that they're going to replay that scene over and over. They're going to withdraw. They won't be as available for their own kids and family. There's a lot of grief, mourning, and loss that they go through. And I'm not sure, I don't know if they get enough time off, if they just the expectation is they have to jump right back into work. These are some things we have to look at and change also.
Definitely. I just wanted to make that point real quick. And a few parents I saw asking, and I'm just going to make it clear right here. I saw a few parents on a few pages asking, why did law enforcement tell the kids to drop their bags, this, and the other thing? You're at a school. The active shooter is a student. I don't know if he's working alone. Columbine is the proof in the point
Right.
right there. There was two shooters, right? I don't know if they're the shooter. Nicholas Cruz disarmed himself and walked out during the evacuation and was found around the block. Okay. So I said that when I was talking to Alexis for last night, talking about active shooter drills. You see law enforcement, heaven forbid that happens. You see law enforcement, they scream at you, put your hands up. Don't argue with them that you're not
No,
the shooter. Just put your hands up, put your bag
absolutely.
down, follow their direction. They don't know. They just got the call.
No,
Their adrenaline's pumping. Their heads are all over the place. They're focusing on 100 different things at once. So to the parents or the kids or anyone who's listening, just do what they say. If you all, as long as you're innocent, everything is gonna you're gonna be all right.
absolutely. And on Parkland and Nicholas Cruz, who I think is going to be sentenced imminently, there was a $130 million lawsuit settlement. Not that money means anything to the parents. They'd much rather have their kids. But the reason it was so high was that the FBI had notice of that there was something like this was going to happen and they didn't act on it. That's why I say there's so many cracks. It's not one thing. Let's go to my daughter's point.
So Shauna says, I think the issue isn't a school issue, but a societal issue. I think we have lost the sense of community. Parents are overworked. Spending 2 or 3 hours after work with your kids isn't enough. I think we need to reduce work hours. 40 hours a week was designed for when the man wants went to work and the wife stayed home, it wasn't created for both parents to be working those hours. We regain the sense of family and community, and mass shootings will reduce. I agree on the workload. I agree that both parents are working. Money is what it is. Not just now. Okay, I'm not getting political in general. Right? We want to do things. We want to go on vacations. We want to make sure our family's in a safe car. We want to go out and enjoy ourselves. Right? Money is always a thing as well. Just putting that out there, but yes, I agree that there is room for improvement on the family battlefield, the family building aspect, if you
This,
will.
it's one good thing, Shauna, I see with younger people that when they go on job interviews, they're definitely questioning what's the work-life balance. So we are starting to see a shift. I'd say 30 and under, that's a number one question. What's that work-life balance going to be like? And so the job that maybe is going to pay a little higher, but doesn't have a great work-life balance is something the younger generation is saying, not so quick, as to Shauna's point. This is not going to be a good environment to raise kids or do things in. We need to
Shout out to
see.
Mary International who added mental health days during COVID times.
Oh,
So
yes.
now we have sick, vacation. Um, we actually have a great maternity leave program, and they've added mental health days as well.
And if you look at some other countries, like I don't know what Marriott does, but Japan, for instance, again, as to Shauna's point, some of the other countries, when you have to place an elderly parent in a nursing home, the companies get involved and help the employee do that. They help the employee with childcare. So we need to have business and industry not just treat the person as a worker, but look at their whole life and be more receptive, right, to giving them solutions when they're under stress. I think that would help a lot too,
We
because
actually
of the.
just we're getting a health coach next week. They're going to be there every other week or
That's going
two
to be
days a
great.
week for mental health and physical health. So, and I want to just touch on that real quick. I'm fortunate enough to work for a great company. I've been with them for quite a while, and this is something that I always say to everybody. Not that I know everything about life. If you hate your job, just find something else, right? If you have a leader, I love my current role because even though 2-3 weeks in a row I'm literally working 70 hours a week, seriously, but at the last 3 weeks up until the holiday week, 70 hours a week, right? But I didn't have leadership that was pushing me to work harder. It was, are you good? Are you sleeping? Are you seeing the kids? Da, da, da. Now, granted, I might be my own worst enemy in some cases where
Mhm.
I am up at 3 a.m. to work out so I can be there at 4 a.m., right? So that's a choice that I make. But the point is that I like where I work and I work for people who are looking out for me and my family and my mental and physical health, even though we still have a ton of work to do, if that makes sense. And if you
Oh,
don't
yeah.
work for somebody like that, you need to find a new spot, period.
Right, because if the parents are less stressed, it'll be a better environment for their kids. And Shauna's other point about it's usually a Caucasian male, but no one really has an answer. I looked to see how many female school shootings. There was one in the South,
Never thought about that.
but that's not something that we see. Now, I don't know. Shauna might know, you might know. I don't see that many girls. You were talking about the video games, but I don't see as many girls on the video games as boys, right? The aggressive videos. You were
There's
saying
lots
that
of
we got
video.
away from
There's
that.
lots of young ladies who video game. I'm sure there's some young
You think
ladies that are
so?
going to be like, I know so.
Okay. But we don't have an answer for why
No,
we don't see it.
and
It's the Caucasian boys that do it, right?
it's
99% of the time.
listen, I can't argue statistics. If that's what it is, then that's what it
That,
is.
that is what it
And
is.
yeah, no, I can't argue. I can't argue statistics. I can't argue what research. Um, but yeah, so real quick, jumping forward, because Monica and somebody had mentioned administration. Monica says many times when administration, this is school administration, tries to take action, there's so much, that's all capitals, pushback from parents, so much so that the administration and teachers are almost to the point where we give up. And I have heard that from my own research, school districts. There's new school boards, or I don't if that's the right term, the board that's made up of the parents that works with or against, in some cases, the school board. Uh, but because of COVID, I'm not getting political. That divide is even bigger.
Mhm.
Masks, vaccines, cyber school, this, that, and the other thing. And to Shauna's point, here we are wrapping a bow on everything. That's where the community disconnect comes in. Instead of everybody uniting and taking care of the village and the village's future, there's disconnect on other topics, and nothing will ever blend or be cohesive when that disconnect is there.
Right. And that's what I said as my point about the main reason they don't have one person with a weapon, whether they select a teacher, somebody, because you're so defenseless
I'm not for that. Let
without
me just
that.
say that real quick. Let me just say that real quick. I'm sorry. So, real quick, while we're here on this topic, I am not for teachers being armed. I'm married to a teacher. I'm friends with teachers. I am not for teachers being armed. And it's not that I wouldn't trust the teachers that I do know. We see teachers sleeping with students all the time. We see teachers misbehaving. That teacher might have a bad day. That teacher might be plotting their own rampage. I'm just putting points out there,
Right.
things that could be, because everybody is human. If you want to perhaps designate one or two teachers, that's something I would be more for. But to me, giving every teacher in the school a firearm is one of the worst ideas in the world. Just putting
Oh,
that
no,
out there
no,
right
no.
now.
I was not suggesting that. And I
Oh
wasn't
no,
even
I'm just saying that that's
right.
where I stand on that. Yeah.
I wasn't even taking a position. But when we talk about maybe a guard or somebody policing the school, the main resistance is the parents. That's what I was going to
I've heard
say.
that. That was a big thing after, I'm just going to say, George Floyd and police reform. Yes, we're
Sure.
pro police. We're also 100% against the bad police. But when school districts came out and said that SROs, that school resource officers, were traumatizing to kids and this and that, well, it's also my understanding that the SRO of Oxford High School and another officer that was there, they were giving some sort of lesson, I believe, to the students when the gunshots rang out. Okay. And I want to paint this picture real quick. Both are a tragedy. Oxford High School, we have 4 dead and a few more injured. Parkland, we have many more dead, right? If you
Right.
have school resource officers, you are already in the fight if this happens, right? I just want to make that very clear.
But absolutely. But here's the thing. I worked in a prison. My daughter, your sister's working in a prison. So having spent many time with the inmates, you have to understand that people who are violent and violent proclivities look for the most relaxed situation to take somebody out. Where have you heard about the shootings? In Colorado, in a movie theater? Where are you more relaxed than with your freezy drink and popcorn and
Mhm.
watching the theater? What did I say at the beginning of the podcast? School should be what? The safest place where the last thing on your mind is this. Where else do you hear about the shootings? Work, the
Yeah,
mall,
work.
work, the mall, places where people feel relaxed, right? But you don't hear about these kind of mass shootings. I'm not suggesting that there be armed guards all over the school, but you have to understand, and I don't know if Shauna has a comment working in the prison, the psyche of the people I've met in my forensic work, and definitely looking for that opportunity where somebody's defenseless and it's the last thing on their mind and there's no weapons. So we have to, I'm not, again, not taking a position one way or the other, just trying to educate people who have not had the opportunity to spend time with the people I've had the opportunity to spend time with.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Right?
mean,
Right? They're
yeah.
looking for that defenseless, relaxed, where there's no way to fight back. And really, like I said about the drills, and you were agreeing, I don't know how many lives you save from those drills. I really don't know.
Yeah. Marla wrote, I agree with the homework balance. COVID showed us what it is like to be home with our children and gave us the ability to work more from home, which helped families change their thinking, and more people are changing to a slower pace. It also unfortunately showed us how divided we can be and brought about more violence. I do agree with that. Riots, looting, property damage. Our children are seeing society break down. How do we have change when
Oh,
so much chaos is all around us? My response is going to be the parents, okay? And mom, you can chime in on this. Parents, it's up to us. I had a teenager who was showing me every conspiracy theory video under the sun. She had her own issues with her anxiety as everything kept getting worse and worse and more uncertain. Uh, Parents, take care of your damn self. Take care of your mental health. Take care of your physical health. Go out on dates. Go out with your friends. Work at a place you want to work at, because then you're putting the oxygen mask on yourself first, and you are not. And mom, I'm going to bring Jocko into this. When he was talking about work life balance, he's said, don't bring that shit home to your 7-year old. Don't bring
Mhm.
that. You're annoyed. You're just not happy with where you work. You have a report that's due the next day, and your boss is going to drill you if it's not done. Don't bring that shit home to your family, right? So, all of those factors, or whatever they are, whatever's making you unhappy, find a way to deal with that issue. Find a way to fix it if there is a way to fix it. If it's beyond your means and you've done everything you can, you have to find a way to detach, because you are your child's balance, foundation, example, role model, oxygen mask. It starts with you. Go ahead.
Yes, and I'm glad Marla said that. 2 points before we finish. One is, where's the other place, the shootings? House of worship. Where are you most relaxed? What did I say? The perpetrators look for where you're the most relaxed. And it's sad to think you have to have a guard at a church, at a synagogue, at a school, but I'm telling you, they're looking for the place where you're least going to see it coming. So, yeah, I agree with what he said. And on that very point, some of the kids told their parents that they felt at Oxford there was going to be a shooting, and some very good parents listened to their kids and kept the kids home. Could you imagine if you sent your kid and they got shot? So listen to the kids. Kids save lives. Kids need to have the access to guidance and counselors. They need to tell their parents, hey, I'm scared, something's going on. Definitely, there was a percentage of kids that did not go to school, thank goodness. So they didn't have to witness that. And their parents listened to them. The parents didn't say, oh, they're just trying to get out of school. They had good communication patterns with the parents and they stayed home. And kids do save lives. Kids unravel plans all the day. It's not always or all the time. It's not always as dramatic as this. The one place that I see kids save lives, it's another topic, is suicide. And they're getting better at telling somebody if they think one of their friends are suicidal. We
That's
have
a
to
big
put
deal.
those, it's a big deal. We have to put the same thing, safeguards in place if they're homicidal, right? Same thing. So thank goodness that those parents listened. I wish the whole school had been closed, and I wish
You,
they had taken him, not let him in school when the parents left, but back to your wife's point, taking him for a comprehensive mental health examination. And I do think skilled psychologists would have gotten to the plan that he had. And then we have to hope that there's the long-term facilities that I said that there's a shortage of that could treat him over time. None of this goes away in a minute. This is long-term treatment by the time it got to this point.
I just want to say something because I think it's important. If maybe it's not that important, but it's something that stood out to me. And I remember, if anybody saw Bowling for Columbine, Marilyn Manson, who, like I said, was blamed or noted at Columbine, things like that. They asked Marilyn Manson, "What would you say to the Columbine shooters if they were in front of you today, or if they were in front of you, if you had the chance?" And he said, "I wouldn't have said anything. I would have listened." Right, and I think that that's a short, powerful response. And we're not defending the actions that this person has carried out, but I'm big on listening beforehand, whether it be the guidance counselor, and that's something I always talk about. Guidance counselors, teachers, not we have that one teacher that we never forget, or a few teacher we never
Oh,
forget, because they
absolutely.
listened, because they were caring, because they stopped everything they did. I hope that's taking place in the schools as much as possible, um, because maybe they are that that outlet, and they can perhaps prevent something or change somebody's outlook on something. So that's just where I'm at as we get to the end. That's where I am with wrapping it up. Again, this is just an absolute tragedy, and
Beautiful kids.
yeah,
Just beautiful kids.
this is a tragedy, and I hope we don't have to discuss this again. I hope we don't have to discuss it ever again. But that might not be the reality. So those are my final thoughts. Mom, anything else from you?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think that's the reality. I don't want to see us become callous. I didn't sleep the last couple nights thinking about all the things that I think about when this happens, that there's parents who won't have grandkids, all the things that won't happen. Shauna, you and I lost our wonderful family member to ALS. And I don't know if you know that one of the students, I'm going to get emotional. One of the students at Parkland was pre-science, pre-med, one of the seniors killed, and her goal was to eradicate ALS. And boy, when I read that, look at, not to take anything away from the parents, but all of us lost something. We have to, like Shauna said, be collective. Of course, the loss is worse for the parents, but all of society lost something, right? Because it
100%.
always seems like not every kid's life is important, certainly, but it always seems like it was the brightest and most talented kids. And maybe that young girl really was going to find that cure for some of the neurodegenerative diseases. I don't want to see us get callous. The loss is enormous. There's not a single remedy. We have to put many things together, and we have to make it a priority, not just when the tragedy happens. From today on, we have to make it a priority. Listen as the Cruz sentencing comes down. The justice system needs to send a message. When Nicholas Cruz gave his statement, he thought there was a chance that he's going to maybe get a lighter sentence. He killed 17 people at Parkland. There's no
Crumbley has
lighter
pleaded not guilty. I don't know if you heard that.
and they lawyered him up. So that's my
Yeah,
final thing. Don't be callous. Let's all work together collectively.
I agree with that. And to, what Monica and my sister and my mom and a few others are saying, there's a lot of reasons that people are divided right now. Trial verdicts, COVID, masks, vaccines. Have your opinions on it. Please don't let it affect your relationships and how you feel about others in your community, because we all definitely need one another, and it's shown yet again yesterday. So that's where we're at. Mom, thank you very much for doing this
You're welcome.
episode. I know it was last minute, but I know you and I wanted to touch on it, and speak our thoughts. And I hope that everybody was able to gain something from it as always. But we will see everybody next time. Take care.
Take care, everybody. Be well.